Happy legendary afternoon. Today we ponder the months-old question, does Mick Schumacher deserve another chance at a Formula One drive? Let's talk about that. Da-da-na-na-na-na-na. Actually, you know what? We don't need a copyright strike. Well, boys and girls, here we are at the end of the 2022 Formula One season, and Mick Schumacher has been cut by Haas. And although he has been given a reserve role at Mercedes, we most likely won't see him on the grid unless one of the two Merc drivers miss a race. While the move by Haas was no surprise to most Formula One fans and had been speculated for months prior, there are still many fans who believe he deserves a seat months after the season has ended. So we decided to take a look into these claims to see if they have any merit. Now, we won't be delving into his performances in Formula One, as many other more talented content creators have looked into that matter already. And honestly, even the most disillusioned fans would have a tough time defending the 2 or 3 good races out of the 45 or so he's seen in Formula One. What we will be looking at is that other argument that seems to show up under any article or video of Mick Schumacher, and that is, his success in Formula 3 and Formula 2 show that he can succeed if given time. Well, I have the Formula 3 and Formula 2 numbers in front of me, so we are going to break it down to see if this argument has any merit. So, come with me, and you'll see me pissing off all Germany and half the F1 fandom. But before we begin, let me give you a warning. If you are going to be looking up these numbers, I must inform you that at the time, the FIA Junior Series were about to be rebranded and or merged. So the current F2 was GP2 prior to 2017, and the current F3 was GP3, as well as F3. See, the third tier had 2 racing series that kind of fed into GP2. Prior to 2019, there was an FIA Formula 3 Euro Championship, and there was the official GP3 that followed along with F1 for races. So when people are like, Leclerc and Stroll were both F3 drivers champions, well, yes and no. Leclerc was a GP3 champion, and Stroll was an F3 Euro champion. Now it's just known as Formula 3. Anyways, it was confusing as hell, and renaming and merging made it a bit of a pain looking these numbers up, so fair warning to anyone who actually wants to do so on their own. For our purposes, we will just be referring to Mick's career as F3 to avoid any confusion, even though it was technically FIA F3 Euro Championship. Hope that clears things up a bit, though I highly doubt it will. So with that out of the way, I'm going to throw it over to my buddy, that bastard Kurt, to take a look at Mick's junior career.
In his first year of F3 in 2017, Mick finished a lowly 12th place in the driver's standings with 94 points. His best finish on the season being a P3 at Monza in the second race of the weekend. His average finishing position for the year out of the 29 races he finished was an uninspiring 9.7, so he finished around about P10 in every race. The champion that year was F1 social media darling Lando Norris, who, although having had 2 retirements to Mick's 0, finished the season with a whopping 441 points. Although Norris had raced in the final 3 races of the 2016 F3 season, this was his first and only full season in F3, making things worse for Mick as he was overwhelmingly beaten by another F3 rookie. Other notable drivers that year include Zhou Guanyu, who placed 8th with 149 points at 4 retirements, and future Haas teammate Nikita Mazepin, who finished 10th in the standings with 108 points and 4 retirements. So it's actually interesting to note here that Schumacher wasn't completely inexperienced in F3 machinery before the start of his rookie year. In 2016, he competed in the MRF Challenge, which is an Indian-based racing series. He ultimately finished 3rd that year, collecting 4 wins and 9 podiums along the way after completing all 16 rounds of the series. So the fact that Mick performed so poorly was a little bit of a shock, as he did have experience in similar cars. In 2017, he finished the worst out of the 4 Prema drivers on the grid, and only 3rd best among rookies, again one of whom being Lando Norris. All in all, it's not a very impressive year at all for Mick, his podium in the 5th race of the year being the only highlight of 2017.
So now we've come to 2018 and Mick's second year in Formula 3, with his subpar performances flowing from the end of 2017 into the beginning of 2018. It would take him even longer in his second year to reach the podium, finally doing so in the 6th race of the season in Hungary. Mick managed another podium again 4 race weekends later, but scoring only 12 points in the 3 races between the podium finishes. Halfway through the season, Mick sat at a lowly P10 in the driver's standings, trailing championship leader Dan Ticktum. Oh Dan, how the turns have tabled. trailing Tictum by 67 points. Having not secured a victory for the first half of the season, Mick managed to string together some very good performances starting from the third race at Spa until the end of the season, including winning 5 races in a row, sweeping all 3 races at the Nürburgring and the first 2 races at the next race weekend at the Red Bull Ring. Heading into the final race weekend of the season, Tictum trailed Schumacher by 49 points, meaning Tictum realistically needed to win all 3 races to even have a chance of securing the championship. The first race saw Mick finish a lowly 12th, while Tictum managed to secure 10 points with a P5 finish. After a terrible start to the weekend, Mick saw his lead dwindle down to just 39 points. Race 2, however, saw Mick come back to finish second, while Tictum only managed a 7th place finish, eliminating any chances of Tictum coming back to take the championship lead and securing Mick his F3 Drivers' Championship. What's interesting to note here is the inconsistency in which Mick raced in the first year and a half of his F3 career. He could finish as high as P6 one race, then fall to 17th the next, then string together a 6th, 3rd, and 6th place finish, only to finish P9, P11, and P12 the next 3 races. It wasn't until halfway through his second full season of Formula 3 that Mick finally began stringing together consistent wins and finishes.
After his F3 championship, Mick was promoted to F2 to continue driving for Prima. As with his F3 career, he did not start off well. He managed a win at Hungary in the 16th race of the year, but his next best finishes were P4 at Austria, 3 P6 finishes, all coming in sprint races, including the singular victory. His P12 finish that year is also a result of 5 DNFs throughout the course of the season. Barring any races he did not finish, Mick finished with an average of only 9th in the races, just a slight improvement of his average of 10th from his rookie F3 year. So it was an average year at best, though not all entirely his fault. So what makes the lowly finish even more concerning was the fact that the grid in general was relatively weak. Champion De Vries was in his 3rd year of the series, and runner-up Latifi was in his 6th year, though his first 2 years were not as a full-time driver. Other notable drivers in F2 this year were Zhou Guanyu, who again beat Mick, finishing 7th, and future teammate Nikita Mazepin again finished the season 18th in the standings. Though Latifi and Zhou would find their way into F1 and De Vries will be driving for AlphaTauri in 2023, this wasn't exactly a year with tough competition. Mick only finished 12th in the standings, but still, Mick was a rookie. The 2020 F2 season saw Mick once again get off to an average start, having his fellow Ferrari Academy drivers Robert Schwartzman and Calum Eilert finish ahead of him in the Red Bull Ring. He finished a respectable P4 in the second weekend at Austria, but again behind teammate Schwartzman, who won the featured race. Having retired from the sprint race at second Austria, Mick was now 10th in the standings. It wouldn't be until the 3rd weekend of the season that Mick saw the podium, managing to finish P3 in both the feature and sprint races at Hungary. After the strong performance, Mick had 2 poor weekends in a row, managing to score only 2 points all weekend at the British Grand Prix. Although scoring 18 points in the 70th anniversary GP at the same track a week later, he was involved in an incident with teammate Robert Schwartzman in the sprint race that cost his team a 1-2 finish when Yuki Tsunoda managed to pass the 2 Prima drivers to take the lead. After this incident at Silverstone, Mick was finally found some consistency, taking home more featured race wins at Monza and Sochi, picking up podiums in the sprint and feature races. Heading into the final round of the season, he was leading the championship by 14 points. So remember, in the 2020 F2 season, the race weekend went like this. Qualifying was on Friday, feature race on Saturday, where points are distributed for finish positions like in F1. Sprint race on Sunday, with points given for P1 through P8, starting 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1. At this time, pole position was awarded 4 points, fastest lap was awarded 2 points. In the feature race, Eilert managed to finish 1 spot ahead of Mick. However, with Mick managing to score the fastest lap, they both finished the race with 10 points apiece. With the score now 215 to 201 in Mick's favor, Mick needed to finish P6 to take the championship no matter where Eilert finished or if he got the fastest lap. Early on in the sprint race, though, disaster struck. Going to turn 4 of the first lap, Mick locked up his tires, creating a flat spot, putting him at a tire disadvantage. He was P2 at the time, but the costly lockup meant it was only a matter of time before he'd be a sitting duck. By lap 19, Mick had dropped from P2 to P6, where Eilert managed to move past him to P3. With 15 laps to go, Schumacher boxed for new tires, putting him outside the points and placing his championship hopes in the hands of his rival. Luckily for Mick, with less than 10 laps in the final race of the season, Eilert's tires began to go off the cliff. He eventually fell to 10th, securing Mick's F2 championship.
So there we have it, folks. A condensed look at Mick's junior racing career immediately before stepping into Formula 1. But before we make our final points and present our conclusions, we would like to throw a few more numbers at you. Since GP2 became F2 in 2017, of all the champions, Mick Schumacher has the least number of wins, the least number of pole positions, the least number of fastest laps, the least number of points, even though there were less races in 2017, 2019, and 2021, the least percentage of points achievable, the smallest margin of victory, and tied for the least amount of podiums. He also clinched his championship, the latest, having done so in the final race of the season. Let that sink in. From 2017 to 2022, Mick Schumacher has the worst stats of any Formula 2 drivers' champion. Not only that, as previously mentioned, one could argue that 2020 was one of the weaker years when looking at F2 driver talent, with only 2019 possibly having less, and Mick still finished with the worst stats out of them all. The only other notable driver from 2020 was a rookie Tsunoda, and Mick still only barely beat a rookie Tsunoda and finished with the worst stats of any F2 champions since F2 became an entity.
So what troubles us is the length of time it takes for Mick to get comfortable in a car, taking almost a year and a half in both F3 and F2 before he started showing any consistent pace. What worries us even more is the fact that the Junior FIA series are both spec series, where the car sees no changes throughout a season. F1 is a totally different beast, where sometimes a team can bring developments in consecutive weekends. It took Mick a year and a half to get comfortable in a spec series, so how do we expect him to get comfortable when today's car might be completely different from a car 2 months from now? Even more worrying, Haas has brought the fewest major developments in 2022, and Mick still struggled. There are fans who claim he'll eventually take over a Ferrari seat. But if he couldn't handle the low pressure Haas and getting comfortable with the least developed car on the grid, how can we expect him to excel in a Ferrari that may see upgrades in consecutive weekends? And he would be expected to compete with and possibly beat a driver like a Max Verstappen. He was barely able to catch up with Haas teammate Kevin Magnussen after Magnussen had an entire year on the sidelines in the Haas. So, and as much as we love K-Mag is not Max Verstappen.
Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport, where a junior champion with Schumacher's pedigree is expected to jump in a car and start showing progress quickly. Although most folks don't want to count his official rookie year, 2021 was still a valuable year of experience for Mick. He was able to acclimate himself onto the team without the pressure of performing well relative to his competition, build relationships and rapport with his engineers and mechanics, and learn the ins and outs of being on the F1 grid. So not exactly a complete wash of a year. And though only officially joining the Ferrari Academy in 2019, has been exposed to and affiliated with various F1 teams while climbing up the motorsport ladder through his father, uncle, and family friend Sebastian Vettel. We've seen past F2 drivers with less experience and exposure come in and make a difference in a backmarker car. For instance, Leclerc and Russell, with Leclerc dragging the 2018 Alfa Romeo to points finishes it didn't deserve, and George Russell managing to make headlines in his second season despite spending his rookie year fighting his slower teammate at the back of the grid, much like Schumacher's rookie season in 2021.
Even though Mick did manage to secure F3 and F2 championship, we're not quite sure it's an indicator for possible future success in F1. F1's not a spec series. The competition's much harder, with a full grid of former junior champions who perform much better than Mick at those same levels and who seem to be able to adapt to changes in their car much better. Although Mick managed to finish in the points twice in 2022, 2 good races and an entire race calendar just doesn't seem to be enough. But who knows? Taking time away might help the young Schumacher to gather himself and come back better than before. Certainly seems to have helped drivers like Alex Albon and Esteban Ocon. As of now, there are many in the F1 paddock who seem to believe Mick should be on the grid, though no one has offered him a seat. And actions do speak louder than words. But if Nick DeVries has proved anything, it's that there's always a chance if everyone has written you off. Now you have a better idea of how Mick performed in F3 and F2 and how he finally won those respective championships. Do you still think those 4 junior seasons are any indication of continued improvement at the F1 level? Mick seems to be a genuinely great guy. He's earned Vettel's seal of approval. He was most certainly fine by us. We like we like the guy. We hope he'll prove us wrong, but the underwhelming way in which he won those junior championships don't really inspire much hope in our eyes. With Audi joining the grid in the next few years and having already declared that they want to field an all-German driver lineup, though they've since kind of backpedaled on this a little bit, we most likely haven't seen the best or the last of Mick Schumacher. Hopefully he'll be able to come back and have a solid career, whether it be as a midfield driver, a number 2 driver on a contender, or even a future world champion. So let us know your thoughts in the comment section. If you think we've earned it, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Stay tuned for more. Remember to eat your bok choy, and we will see you on the next one.